The green room at CNN's Washington studio was unusually tense that Tuesday evening. J.D. Vance had arrived 20 minutes early, moving through the hallways with the easy confidence of someone who believed the conversation was already won. He'd done this before. National television, prime time. A younger congresswoman from Texas who'd been in office less than 2 years. He adjusted his tie in the mirror and smiled at his reflection. This would be simple. Jasmine Crockett arrived with 3 minutes to spare, carrying a leather portfolio under one arm and a small rolling case that her aide positioned carefully beside her chair. She nodded politely to the makeup artist, declined the water offered by a production assistant, and sat perfectly still while the microphone was attached to her collar. J.D. Vance watched from across the room. Something about the portfolio caught his attention for a moment, then he dismissed it. Probably talking points, maybe a few printouts. He'd seen it 100 times. The broadcast opened with the standard CNN evening news package: sanctions, economic indicators, a Supreme Court decision everyone was still parsing. Then Anderson Cooper's voice cut through. Tonight, a debate that has captured national attention. The question of presidential accountability, financial transparency, and what the American people deserve to know about their elected leaders. Joining us, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas. The camera found them seated across from each other at a circular table designed to create the illusion of conversation rather than confrontation. J.D. Vance leaned forward slightly, already occupying more space than the table offered. Jasmine Crockett sat with her hands folded on the portfolio, her posture suggesting someone waiting for a meeting to begin rather than someone preparing for combat. Anderson Cooper posed the opening question about presidential financial disclosures and conflicts of interest. J.D. Vance didn't wait for Crockett to respond. He turned slightly away from her, addressing the camera directly, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who'd learned to speak in 7-second sound bites optimized for virality. Look, Anderson, I think what we're seeing here is another example of the media and certain members of Congress. He gestured vaguely in Crockett's direction without looking at her. Trying to create controversy where none exists. The American people care about jobs, they care about inflation. They don't care about fishing expeditions into tax returns and hotel receipts from 5 years ago. Frankly, I'm surprised Representative Crockett has time for this kind of thing when her own district is facing real problems she hasn't addressed. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that looked warm on camera but carried an edge designed to cut. But I suppose when you're new to Congress, you focus on what gets you attention rather than what gets results. Jasmine Crockett did not respond immediately. She looked down at the portfolio, then back at Vance, then at Cooper. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that the audio engineer had to adjust levels mid-sentence. Senator Vance just said the American people don't care about presidential financial conflicts of interest. I'd like to address that claim directly if that's all right. She opened the portfolio with the care of someone handling something fragile. The first page was visible to the camera, official congressional letterhead, a date stamp, visible signature lines. This is a FOIA response from the Government Accountability Office dated March 12th of this year. It details foreign payments received by businesses owned by immediate family members of sitting presidents during their terms in office. She looked up at Vance. Her expression had not changed. I requested this document 6 months ago. It arrived 4 weeks ago. I've been waiting for the right moment to discuss it publicly. J.D. Vance's smile didn't fade, but something in his posture shifted. He sat back slightly, recalculating. Representative, I'm sure you have some document there, but let's be honest about what this is. This is selective outrage. Every president's family has business interests. You didn't seem concerned when— I'm going to stop you there, Senator. Crockett's voice had not risen. If anything, it had gotten quieter. I'm not going to debate whataboutism with you tonight. I'm going to present documented facts, and you're going to have the opportunity to respond to them with facts of your own. If you'd like to do that, I'm ready. If you'd prefer to keep talking about what you imagine my motivations to be, that's your choice, but it won't change what's in this folder. She placed her hand flat on the document. Would you like to know what the GAO found? Anderson Cooper, sensing the shift in energy, leaned in. Senator Vance, do you want to respond to that? Vance spread his hands in a gesture of theatrical patience. Of course, I'm always happy to look at actual evidence rather than partisan accusations. Go ahead, Representative, show us what you've got. Jasmine Crockett turned to the second page of the document. Between January 2025 and December 2025, businesses owned or partially owned by immediate family members of the sitting president received $4. $2 million in payments from foreign entities. These are not campaign contributions. These are not disclosed gifts. These are payments for services, licensing fees, consulting contracts, and in 3 cases, payments whose purpose is listed in the GAO report as unspecified. She looked up. The GAO is not a partisan organization, Senator. It's a congressional watchdog. It reports numbers. This is the number. She slid the document across the table toward Vance. You can read it yourself if you'd like. J.D. Vance glanced down at the document but did not pick it up. $4 million across an entire year, spread across multiple businesses and family members, is not the scandal you're pretending it is. These are legitimate business transactions by private citizens who happen to be related to... I'm not finished. Crockett had opened the portfolio again. This time she removed a second document, this one thicker, bound with a black clip. This is a comparative analysis prepared by the Congressional Research Service. I requested it after I received the GAO report. It compares foreign payments to presidential family businesses across the last 5 administrations. She turned to a marked page. Under President Obama, 0 foreign payments to immediate family businesses during his term. Under President George W. Bush, 0. Under President Clinton, 0. Under President George H.W. Bush, 0. Under President Reagan, 0. She looked up at Vance. The room was completely silent except for the hum of the studio lights. Every other president in modern history, $0. This president's family, $4. $2 million in 1 year alone. She paused. So when you say this is normal, Senator, what are you comparing it to? Vance's face had colored slightly. His hands, which had been loose and gesturing freely, were now gripping the edge of the table. You're cherry-picking data. You're ignoring... I'm using the Congressional Research Service, Senator. If their methodology is flawed, you're welcome to point out where. Crockett's voice remained perfectly level. But let's stay with what we know. $4, $2 million, foreign entities, family businesses. 1 year. Would you like me to continue? Anderson Cooper, whose role had been reduced to observer, nodded. Please, Representative. Jasmine Crockett turned to the next section of the document. Of the $4, $2 million, $1. $8 million came from 3 countries currently under congressional sanctions review. I won't name them on air because the GAO report classifies the entities as sensitive foreign sources, but they are listed on page 19 if you'd like to verify. She tapped the page. The payments were made to a consulting firm registered in Delaware, owned by a shell company, which is in turn owned by a family trust. The beneficial owner of that trust is listed in paragraph 4, subsection C. She slid the document across the table again. Would you like to read that name aloud, Senator, or should I? J.D. Vance did not reach for the document. His jaw tightened. I'm not going to participate in a show trial based on documents I haven't had time to review. You're ambushing me with paperwork and expecting me to... Senator, I sent your office a courtesy email 9 days ago informing you that I would be discussing presidential financial conflicts on this program tonight and offering to share the source documents in advance if you wanted to prepare a response. Crockett reached into the portfolio and removed a printed email chain. Your chief of staff replied. She read from the page, Senator Vance is fully briefed on all relevant issues and does not require advance materials. That was your office's response. So you were offered preparation time. You declined it. She set the email on the table between them. If you're unprepared now, Senator, that's a choice you made. The silence that followed was absolute. J.D. Vance stared at the email without touching it. Anderson Cooper's face showed the carefully maintained neutrality of a journalist watching something unfold that he had not expected. Somewhere in the control room, a producer was almost certainly telling the director to hold the shot. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The only sound was the faint mechanical hum of the cameras and someone in the hallway outside the studio clearing their throat. Finally, Vance spoke. His voice had lost the smooth confidence of the opening. I don't need advance materials to know that you're distorting. Let's talk about distortion. Crockett opened the portfolio to a new section. This one had colored tabs marking different subsections. The GAO report breaks down the $4, $2 million by payment type. $1. $1 million is categorized as hotel and resort fees paid above market rate. Do you know what that means, Senator? She didn't wait for an answer. It means foreign governments and foreign government-adjacent entities booked rooms at family-owned properties and paid significantly more than the standard published rate. In one case, a foreign delegation booked an entire floor for 4 nights and paid $47,000 for rooms that would normally cost $18,000 at the property's own listed rates. She looked at Vance. That's not a business transaction. That's a transfer of wealth disguised as a business transaction. The GAO uses the term above market rate because they're required to be diplomatic. The rest of us can use a simpler word. You're accusing? Vance's voice rose for the first time. You're sitting here on national television accusing a sitting president's family of taking bribes, and you're doing it based on a report that doesn't even— I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Senator. Crockett's voice had not changed. I'm reading you the findings of the Government Accountability Office, a nonpartisan federal agency created by Congress to investigate exactly this kind of financial activity. If you believe their findings are incorrect, you're welcome to request your own investigation. You're a senator. You have that power. She closed the folder and rested both hands on top of it. But what you can't do is pretend this is normal, because I just showed you it's not. Every other modern president, $0. This one, $4, $2 million. Those are just numbers, Senator. They're not partisan. They're not my opinion. They're documented facts compiled by a congressional agency. J.D. Vance looked at Anderson Cooper as if expecting intervention. Cooper simply gestured for him to respond. Vance turned back to Crockett. His face was flushed now, a visible line of perspiration forming at his hairline despite the studio's aggressive air conditioning. I think what you're doing here is dangerous. You're taking legitimate business activities and twisting them into some kind of conspiracy theory because you don't like the current administration. That's not oversight. That's a political hit job. Then let me ask you a direct question. Crockett leaned forward slightly. It was the first time her posture had changed in 15 minutes. If a member of President Biden's family had received $4, $2 million from foreign entities during his first year in office, including $1, $8 million from countries under sanctions review and $1 million of it came from above-market rate hotel bookings that the GAO classified as irregular, would you be calling congressional hearings right now, yes or no? The silence was immediate and total. J.D. Vance opened his mouth. Nothing came. He looked down at the table, then at the camera, then back at Crockett. His hands were no longer gripping the table edge. They were flat on the surface, palms down, as if steadying himself. Anderson Cooper waited. 10 seconds, 15, 20. The camera held on Vance's face. His expression cycled through calculation, frustration, and finally something that looked like resignation. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. That's a hypothetical question. No, it's not. Crockett's response was immediate. It's the same question, just with a different name. If the behavior is acceptable now, it was acceptable then. If it wasn't acceptable then, it's not acceptable now. That's not a hypothetical. That's consistency. She paused. So I'll ask again. If this were a Democratic president's family, would you be demanding investigations? J.D. Vance looked at Anderson Cooper. I'm not going to engage with gotcha questions designed to— It's not a gotcha question, Senator. It's the entire point. Crockett opened the portfolio again. Because here's what I have in the third section of this folder. Transcripts of your own statements from 2022 and 2023 calling for investigations into Biden family business dealings based on allegations that turned out to involve significantly smaller amounts of money and zero confirmed foreign payments during his presidency. She pulled out a highlighted printout. This is from your interview on Fox News, October 2023. You said, and I quote, "The American people deserve to know if their president's family is profiting from his position. Even the appearance of conflict of interest is disqualifying. We need full transparency, and we need it now." End quote. She set the transcript on the table. That was you, Senator, 2 years ago, talking about alleged conflicts involving amounts the investigations never actually confirmed. Now we have $4.2 million in confirmed payments, documented by a congressional watchdog, and your position is that it's a partisan attack to even mention it. J.D. Vance's face had gone from flushed to pale. He stared at the transcript as if it were evidence in a trial he hadn't known he was attending. When he spoke, his voice had lost all of its earlier authority. Context matters. The situations are different. How? Crockett's question was so quiet it almost didn't register as a challenge. Explain to me how they're different. Use the numbers. Use the documents. Explain how zero confirmed payments is worse than $4. $2 million in confirmed payments. I'd genuinely like to understand your reasoning. Vance said nothing. His hands moved from the table to his lap. He looked at Anderson Cooper again, this time with an expression that read less like a request for intervention and more like a plea for rescue. Cooper, to his credit, simply waited. The silence extended past 20 seconds. 30. Somewhere in the control room, someone was making the decision to let it run. This was the moment that would be clipped, shared, and replayed for days. A sitting senator asked a simple question about his own stated principles, unable to answer. Finally, Vance managed, "I think we're out of time." "We're not." Anderson Cooper's voice was gentle but firm. "We have another 12 minutes. Representative Crockett, please continue." Jasmine Crockett nodded. She turned to a new section of the portfolio, this one marked with a red tab. The fourth section of the GAO report deals with disclosure requirements. Under federal ethics law, immediate family members of sitting presidents are required to disclose foreign income over $10,000 within 30 days of receipt. The GAO reviewed the financial disclosures filed by all immediate family members with business interests during the time period in question. She ran her finger down the page. Of the $4 to $2 million in confirmed foreign payments, $7 million was not disclosed within the required 30-day window. In 6 cases, the payments were disclosed more than 4 months late. In 2 cases, they were never disclosed at all and only appear in the GAO report because the foreign entities were themselves under separate investigation and the payments surfaced in banking records. She looked up at Vance. "That's not a political opinion, Senator. That's a violation of federal disclosure law. It's documented, it's time-stamped. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is what we do about it." J.D. Vance's response was almost inaudible. "I'm sure there are explanations for the delays." "I'm sure there are too." Crockett's tone suggested she genuinely meant it. "But the law doesn't say disclose within 30 days unless you have an explanation. It says 30 days, and when the payment is coming from a foreign government or a foreign entity with ties to a government, the disclosure requirement exists specifically to prevent the appearance of improper influence." She closed the folder. "Which brings me back to your statement from 2023. You said even the appearance of conflict is disqualifying. We're not talking about appearance anymore. We're talking about $2, $7 million in late or missing disclosures. By your own standard, what should happen now?" Vance looked at her with something that might have been respect or might have been exhaustion. "You've made your point." "I haven't, actually." Crockett reached down to the rolling case beside her chair. For the first time, J.D. Vance seemed to register that it existed. She unzipped it and removed a 3-ring binder, thick enough that it made a sound when she placed it on the table. "This is the section I was really waiting to get to. The GAO report is federal-level financial tracking. What it doesn't capture is the human cost." She opened the binder to the first tabbed section. "This is the story of a contractor named Michael Torres. He owns a small electrical services company in Nevada. In 2024, his company was hired to do emergency electrical work at a family-owned resort property after a storm damaged the main power system." She turned the binder so the camera could see it. There were invoices, photos of electrical panels, email chains. Michael's company completed the work in August 2024. The invoice was $68,000, industry standard for that kind of emergency commercial electrical work. The contract stated payment within 45 days. She turned the page. Michael sent his first payment request on September 22, 2024. No response. He sent a second request on October 15th. The response from the property's accounting office said the invoice was under review. Third request, November 8th. Fourth request, December 20th. On January 14, 2025, Michael received a letter from the property's legal team offering to settle the invoice for $31,000, less than half the contracted amount, and stating that if he did not accept the settlement within 10 days, they would consider the matter closed and he would receive nothing. Jasmine Crockett looked up from the binder. "Michael Torres is 58 years old. He's been running his electrical business for 23 years. He has 4 employees, all of whom depend on him for their health insurance. He took out a short-term loan to cover the materials and labor costs for the resort job because the contract promised payment within 45 days, and he trusted that a property owned by a presidential family would honor its contracts." She turned another page. Michael couldn't afford to wait for a lawsuit that might take years. He accepted the $31,000 settlement. He laid off 2 of his 4 employees. He's now working 70-hour weeks trying to make up the $37,000 loss. His wife told me he hasn't taken a day off since February. The studio was silent. Anderson Cooper's expression had shifted from journalistic neutrality to something more human. J.D. Vance was looking at the table. "This isn't abstract policy, Senator." Crockett's voice was quiet, but there was something beneath the calm now, something that felt like barely contained fury that had been waiting for exactly this moment to surface. "This is a man who did his job, billed fairly, and got cheated by people who had the money to pay him but chose not to because they knew he couldn't fight back. And this isn't an isolated case." She flipped to the next tab. "This is Patricia Chen, a florist in Florida who provided $14,000 worth of flowers and plants for an event at a different family-owned property. She was offered a settlement of $6,000 7 months after completing the work. She's 67. She had to close her shop. Another tab. This is David Reynolds, a plumbing contractor in Georgia. $52,000 invoice settled for $19,000 after 8 months of non-payment. He lost his house. Another tab. This is Angela Martinez, a catering company owner in Arizona. $91,000 invoice for a corporate event, settled for $41,000. She declared bankruptcy in March. Crockett closed the binder and placed both hands on top of it. I have 34 documented cases in this binder. Contractors, small business owners, vendors who did work for family-owned properties, invoiced fairly, and were forced to settle for fractions of what they were owed after being stalled for months. The combined total of unpaid or underpaid invoices is $9 million. The combined settlement payments these people were forced to accept totals $680,000. That's a $2 million shortfall spread across 34 American small business owners who trusted that a contract meant something. She looked at J.D. Vance. So, when you say the American people care about jobs and not financial transparency, Senator, I want you to look at these names and tell me these people don't deserve to know whether the family members of their president are systematically cheating contractors while simultaneously collecting $2 million from foreign entities. J.D. Vance's hands were shaking slightly. He pulled them off the table entirely, folding them in his lap out of camera view. When he spoke, his voice had lost all trace of the confidence he'd entered with. Those are private business disputes. They're a pattern. Crockett cut him off, but her voice remained level. 34 cases, 5 different properties, 3 different states, identical playbook. Complete the work, delay payment, offer lowball settlement, force acceptance through financial pressure. That's not a dispute. That's a business model. And when the people running that business model are immediate family members of the sitting President of the United States, it stops being a private matter. She opened the binder one more time to the final section. This last tab is a little different. This is a letter I received 3 weeks ago from a woman named Susan Torres. She's Michael Torres's daughter. She's 29 years old. She has a degree in electrical engineering. She was supposed to start working for her father's company this year, take over some of the project management so he could start reducing his hours. Crockett's voice had softened, but the weight behind it had increased. Susan wrote to me after she saw a news segment about presidential family business practices. She didn't know I was already investigating this. She just wanted someone in Congress to know what had happened to her father. She wanted someone to care that a man who had worked his entire life, who had built something real and employed people and paid his taxes and done everything right, had been destroyed by people who didn't need the money and took it anyway because they could. Crockett looked directly at the camera. Susan's letter ends with a question. She asks, if the people running our country treat contractors like this, what does that say about how they'll treat the rest of us? I don't have an answer for her, Senator, but I think she deserves one. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences. This one carried weight. J.D. Vance looked at Jasmine Crockett with an expression that might have been shame or might have been anger, or might have been the recognition that he had entered a conversation he was never prepared for. He opened his mouth twice and closed it both times without speaking. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say whether you think this is acceptable. Crockett's voice was gentle now, almost kind. I want you to say whether $2 million in foreign payments, $7 million in late or missing disclosures, and $2 million in unpaid contractor invoices represents the kind of financial behavior you'd accept from any other presidential family. I want you to apply the same standard you demanded in 2023. That's all. Just consistency.